Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we're talking about the Western Conference Finals. Specifically, we're talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves and what has sort of happened to this team as they have really sort of fallen short in this series, already down 0 games to 3. And standing on the verge of elimination after, uh, fighting their way to the Western Conference Finals in the first place. So, in case you don't know what's going on here, Minnesota is trailing 0-3 against the Dallas Mavericks. Minnesota has been close in a couple of these games. All three of their losses have been by single digits, but games 1 and 2 in particular were really within a single possession in terms of the final score. Now, at the end of the day, that earns you some points in terms of morale, but it doesn't account for too much when you still lose the games, right? Minnesota was close, but they still lost. They're still down 0-3 here. So the question is, what has gone wrong for the Timberwolves? And the answer is really multiple factors. But we'll start on the defensive end here. First and foremost, for Minnesota, they are losing the battle inside, where they had traditionally been pretty much in elite territory. Right? They were second among playoff teams in rebounds allowed in these playoffs. Currently, they have a -11 rebounding differential total against the Mavericks. So the Timberwolves were used to not giving their opponents too many second chance opportunities. So far, that has not happened. Meanwhile, in terms of points in the paint, they're getting burned pretty consistently there as well. -42 points in total in terms of points in the paint, 120 for the Timberwolves versus 166 for the Mavericks. So their opponents are out-rebounding them. They are scoring way more points in the paint than the Timberwolves. And this is a unit that was used to, for the most part, controlling the interior, right? When you've got a group of big men consisting of, Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, and Naz Reid, you pretty consistently win or flat out dominate inside. That simply has not been happening for the Timberwolves. And that leads into a sort of wider defensive issue for Minnesota here, because their defense is not coming even remotely close to slowing down Dallas's star players. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are getting whatever they want, whenever they want, seemingly, through these first 3 games. And that's reflected in their shooting numbers, right? For Doncic, 32.7 points per game, 46.4% from the field, 40.6% from 3. Meanwhile, for Kyrie, slightly fewer points, but still 27.7 points per game for him. He is shooting 52.5% from the field and 43.8% from beyond the arc. This duo is just sort of tearing the defense apart, so to speak. And we can see, if you look at the shot chart for Luka and Kyrie, they're hitting from everywhere, right? It's pretty much all green across the board on that shot chart. But you look in particular at those 2 sections in the middle, those 2 zones that we would definitively say are, in the paint, in the interior, they are getting an incredibly high number of shots in the paint at the rim, scenarios like that, where they're not just shooting from the outside, right? Their 3-point shooting is fantastic. They are doing better than Minnesota on that front, for sure. But it's not just an attack from outside. Kyrie and Luka Doncic are getting downhill. They're getting into the paint and either finding opportunities for themselves, as you can see from the shot chart and their percentages, but also finding opportunities for some of their other guys, right? If you look at the stats of guys like Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, Derek Lively, no single member of that trio is putting up sort of, numbers that would attract too much attention, but collectively, that trio is finding opportunities to pretty consistently get at the Minnesota defense and burn them repeatedly. Now, Lively, not really sure what his medical status is. He got hurt. That's kind of up for debate about whether he's going to continue to play. But to this point in the series, he has been contributing pretty heavily to an offensive attack from Dallas that Minnesota simply has not had any significant answers for, right? If Luka and Kyrie aren't scoring themselves, they're creating opportunities for teammates to score, and Minnesota has not been able to stop that. Now, even with all that said, all 3 games here have been single-digit losses for Minnesota, so obviously they're still competing, they're still close, and you would hope in that scenario that you could start leaning on your own sort of star players here to close that gap and get you the win, right? Kind of in a similar vein to what we saw from them against the Nuggets. They leaned incredibly heavily on their big names. The problem is, in this series, those big names have not been able to really get it done the way that they previously had been. You take a look at Anthony Edwards, 22 points, 8.3 rebounds, 8 assists. Those numbers are still pretty good, but the efficiency is very, very much down from where it was before. 38.6% from the field, 33.3% from 3. If you then look to Karl Anthony Towns, the other sort of primary offensive threat here, his numbers are terrible. 15 points per game, 8.3 rebounds per game. The rebounds are actually, not so bad, but the shooting is horrendous. 27.8% from the field, 13.6% from 3. Just absolutely horrific stuff from Towns on the offensive end here, and it has led to scenarios where Minnesota are having to rely on guys that they normally wouldn't, right? Guys like Naz Reid, guys like Jaden McDaniels have been asked to carry a lot more offensively than they're used to. In their defense, they have stepped up fantastically, right? Those two in particular, Reid and McDaniels, they're both shooting over 50% from the field and 50% from 3, which is ridiculously efficient shooting, but it's not enough, right? The Timberwolves are not built to have Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels carry the team if Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns aren't shooting the ball well, right? These are fantastic performances from 2 guys who have stepped up in a major way, but if the stars don't shine here for Minnesota, then it doesn't really matter. They need those performances, and they're just not getting them. So, long story short, for Minnesota, they were the best defense in the league in the regular season by defensive rating. That defense is getting picked apart by the Mavericks, right? You've got guys in Luka and Kyrie who are incredibly adept at just finding the weak points in their defense and exploiting them. The size on the interior from guys like Gobert, Towns, and Reid has not presented that sort of stone wall that they've previously employed, right? They have not been able to slow down Dallas's attack on the inside. As I mentioned, Minnesota's minus 42 in points in the paint. So Dallas is still finding ways to score inside. And it might sound a little cliche, but it kind of feels like Minnesota are dealing with a bit of a hangover effect here, so to speak, right? They had to get into an incredibly high emotional state to get past the Nuggets, to come back in that series and win Game 7. And it seems like their ability to get to a similar sort of peak in terms of their intensity in this series is limited, right? They're playing a little bit more flat and a little bit more tired at times than what we would expect. I don't know. That might be reading a little bit too much into it, but watching some of these games does feel like there are moments where in the last series, guys would have gotten up and had a certain degree of intensity that we're seeing not quite the same level in this series. But if you're Minnesota, the question remains, can you turn it around? The answer I would say is no. I mean, no one has ever come back from an 0-3 deficit, and that's for a very good reason. Normally, you don't lose 3 straight games without there being fundamental problems in terms of your ability to match up. So suddenly fixing all the issues that I just outlined for Minnesota and winning 4 straight games against the Mavericks is unlikely, right? And that's kind of putting it maybe as politely as I possibly can here. I don't think all these problems sort of magically disappear overnight. I do believe that Minnesota can fight in this series. I absolutely believe they can avoid the sweep. They should avoid the sweep. It's going to be incredibly disappointing if they don't. But at this point, if you're Minnesota, all you can really say is, or hope for is, you know, why not us, right? No team's ever come back from 0-3 down. Someone statistically has to be the first team to do it. Why not us? And sure, that works in terms of a motivating factor, but in terms of the reality of winning 4 games with this sort of current level of effort against the incredible efficiency that we've seen from Dallas, I don't really see it happening. But if you're Minnesota, you don't really have any other alternative. You just have to hope that the scenario plays out for the first time in NBA history. But that's all I got. Let me know what you think. Do you believe that the Timberwolves can fix these problems? Do you think Edwards or Towns, or hopefully both, bounces back in game 4 and puts up the kind of performance that they've been waiting to see from those two? Or, you know, is this one pretty much done? Are we just waiting for the Mavs to sort of finish things off and punch their ticket to the finals? But either way, please feel free to let me know what you think. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.